we were talking about how the genesis of the project really. You go ahead.
Yeah, so that first year when we were here in 15, summer 16, sorry.
16, yeah.
I'm going to keep doing that 15, 16 thing. But that first summer, one of my favorite things about that, and I think one of the things that brought all three of us together that year, was that we spent a lot of time around the dinner table just talking about our different art, like my novels and your music and Betsy's visual art. And so there was a lot of conversation about collaboration and just what art is and everything. And so we were all interested in, knowing what we all did. And so Betsy showed us a lot of her visual stuff, and you played us a lot of the things that you had worked on up to that point. And you asked to see some of the stuff that I had written, and I shared this story with you. And I think it was just called Nora. And it was about this ex-girlfriend that I had for a little while. I don't even know that you could really call it that, but a fling or something,
Right.
And but a person that nonetheless left a mark on my life, as people do. And I think you really connected with that.
Yeah, I connected with that story a lot. It reminded me of a girl that I've been involved with to an extent, and I actually sent her the story, and she said, "That sounds like me." So I've met very few girls that have read Nora or listened to it that didn't think that they were in some way Nora,
And so,
which is the magic of Nora,
And in a lot of ways, I think that story or that name, because we always talk about that's my Nora or that's my Nora, and so she the name Nora and the character and the story Nora became kind of this metaphor that could be which makes me feel kind of good as a writer, because as a writer you want things to be relatable and sort of explore something universal.
That's almost a meme in a way, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's what we've been talking about.
Yeah, we've been talking about that. Yeah. And so when Jeremy because Jeremy really related to it, and over that next year, whenever we would talk on the phone or whatever, we often would go back to that story. And I'm not sure what.
I think I texted Shane and said, "Hey, will you send a link to that story again? I want to read it." Probably 16 or 17 times.
Right. Yeah.
Because I delete my text messages a lot, but I would go back and read it a lot. When I got the idea, I got commissioned to do a flute solo, and then I had the idea of
Commission from who? I'm sorry.
just a flautist.
Oh, okay, okay.
But see, the original idea for this album, actually, I'm just remembering this, was I was going to do, I had this sort of a joke idea, which a lot of my good ideas, or ideas that I think are good at least, turn out they start as jokes. And so I was at my house in Florence, and I was writing in my office at the time when I still lived in Alabama, and my neighbor across the street, Kenneth, was a crazy person. He had lived there for a long time. He was just out of his mind. He buried knives in his front yard and stuff. He's that kind of dude.
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, he was a wild guy. He would go out and start yelling at people in his front yard a lot and cursing and carrying on. And so I had this idea of taking that monologue of him yelling at no one and then replacing all the curse words with percussion instruments. And so having someone read a dialogue that was metered out in some way, and replacing all the curse words with a solo percussionist, and each time they said this particular curse word, it would be this instrument, and that curse word, it would be that instrument. And here's the best part, it would be called percussing. And so that was
Excellent.
So it was a joke that I would tell. I'm gonna do this piece, and I'd go through the whole thing, and it would get a laugh 3 out of 5 times.
Right.
And so I kept going back, and then that idea developed into more of a serious idea where I was going to have 2 actors on stage with 2 percussionists behind them, playing their dialogue back and forth as an argument. And then I said, "Why stop there? We can have 6 people on stage, with a piano and a quartet and a percussionist, or and we could have." I started to think of these ideas of these giant theatrical 7-minute long recital pieces,
just about cursing.
Yeah, well, just arguments or dialogue and back and forth and that sort of thing. And so that's when I said, okay, I've really taken that one out to about as far as it needs to go, so let's reel it back into something we can actually do. And so that's when I got the idea of taking Nora and making it a flute a flute solo with dialogue. And so I sat down and I texted Shane. I said, "Hey, how do you think that would go?" And he said, "That'd be hot." So I sat down.
That's about the time you asked me to record it.
Yeah, so I asked him to record it, and he recorded it, and he sent it to me. He recorded it on his iPhone and sent it to me, and I kind of chopped it up and made it, put pauses in there and that sort of thing. And then I sat down to start writing the flute solo, and then as these things do, it was a flute solo for about 3 seconds before it became this like giant electronic collage thing. And so I think I sat down and started doing it around like 6 o'clock that night, and at maybe 5 or 6 o'clock the next morning, I'd stayed up all night working on it, and it was finished.
Yeah.
And
the first time he sent it to me, and I heard it, and I knew that Jeremy was talented, but to hear the story that I had written sort of come to life in this completely new way was, I don't know, it sort of woke something up in me about in terms of collaboration, and so then we had this conversation about whether or not we needed, can we do more than just this one piece? And so I fired a couple of other poems and other short pieces off.
And about that time, I was coming here. I was coming to Azule.
Right.
So he sent me a number of other things as I was getting here, and I was working on another project, but I started working on that stuff. So we found a time for him to come down to Azule during this summer. We were here for 2 days.
Yeah, it was essentially what you're doing. I came in one night, we worked the whole next day, and then I left the next day. So.
Okay. And we recorded all of it, and then I went home to my busy life, and he went home to his busy life, and I edited some of the vocal tracks. And then when I found out that he was coming back, and that I had a small gap in my schedule, I said, well, what better way to spend that day away from work than working?
Yeah.
And so as far as how does it work musically wise? Is the flute solo somehow representing this Nora's voice?
So there's no flute solo anymore.
Right. I don't think it's flute in it at all.
There's no flute.
Yeah,
so that
it's turned into a whole other thing.
What I was trying to do at first was I was trying to create an electronic soundtrack for the flute solo to play with.
Sure.
And then, so I was going to kind of do like a flute with tape, or a flute with electronic accompaniment sort of thing. And then I was like, this is too good to put a flute solo in.
I kind of want to play. I kind of want to play a cool game.
Okay.
And that game is called. I'm gonna explain the music track, the way I understand it, and then you can talk about it.
Okay.
In a much more intelligent way, right?
Okay.
And so one of the things about Nora, the story, is that there are. By my count, 4 characters that are mentioned in the story. There's me, or the
male protagonist.
The male protagonist. There's Nora. There's this character Jane, who is the protagonist's ex-girlfriend, and then there's the guy that Nora was currently with. Right. So it's a story about infidelity and intrigue. Right. But so those are the 4 characters, and they all kind of have these themes, these recurring refrain sort of moments in the music. Nora, the character, is a dancer, and anytime Nora is mentioned or is playing a prevalent part in the scene, there's this little piano riff that sort of recurs every time she comes in, or every time I mention dancing. Then the guy that she was seeing at the time, every time he's kind of in the mix, there's this weird sort of off-key, off-pitch guitar thing, guitar strum, because it's like
dissonant, right?
Right, it's like she's dating this guy,
Yeah.
Or it kind of takes you out of it takes you out of where you are in your relationship, and there's this third party that.
Right, because the music is really sort of magical, and it just kind of floats along, and then all of a sudden there's this brown.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then I think that the third element that kind of stands out to me is that the male protagonist is in this state of kind of emotional influx, right? And anytime that emotional influx plays a part in it, either when he talks about how Jane left and he started drinking a lot and trying to fill up that void that she left with something else, there's sort of this rock guitar that kind of comes in that's not like the other guitar at all, there's this sort of thumping or pulsing kind of rock sound that's not there for very long, but that it feels like that kind of emotional build. And then it happens one other time whenever Nora leaves as well, right? So like it happens when Jane leaves, and then also when Nora leaves. So now you can talk about all of that stuff.
Well, essentially what we've outlined is like the Wagnerian idea of leitmotifs. You know?
See, I was also thinking Berlioz, maybe Symphonie Fantastique.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing where characters have recurring themes, which most of the time I think is not on accident. Like
An accident. Yeah.
yeah, I think when I sat down to do that track, it was really done within the course of about like a 12-hour
Nice.
like sitting, which is like that's always where I write the best, I think. And I just sit down and I don't want to stop until it's finished. So that's really what the thing that took the longest was editing the vocals and everything. And
Because I'm no professional.
I'm no professional.
No, but that's brilliant work.
So, but the music, there's a development to it as the story develops, and there's a main theme that happens at the very beginning. But I also tried to, since I am working with the electronic element of it all, I have no limitations. Well, I think there's like 45 tracks, separate tracks on this. So, let's say it's a 4-note motif. I can have the first note up here in this voice with this electronic voice, and then the second note sometimes can be 6 octaves down, and then the third note can be up 2 octaves, and then the
I
fourth
almost
note
wish
can
that
be,
we were on the piano right now.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I
good.
can
Yeah,
move it around like that.
I think we should like move to the piano.
You
Can
think
we
so?
do like a whole 30-minute episode of this?